business like we always do. The first vote will be to approve the agenda, which was published on page 2 of our newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the
Motion to
agenda?
approve.
Is it seconded?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. The agenda is approved. We'd also like to approve the minutes of the June meeting. They were published in pages 22 to 23 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. The minutes are approved. We're going to have a quick treasurer's report from Jerry Garson.
We operate on a fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. We'd received $2,608 in dues, $1,771 towards the awards dinner, giving us total revenues of $4,380. Our expenses were $4,908, mostly made up of post office box of $200, the website of $320, the awards dinner of $3,060, $400 in memberships and other organizational support among our offices of $300, and insurance of $620, giving us a net expenditures for the period of $528. Our bank balance as of June 30th and as of today is $5,680. And we received no money since July 1st.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. And then we have just a couple of quick announcements. On September 4th, we're going to have an in-person event with Miranda Spivak, who's a local journalist, and she wrote a book called Backroom Deals in Our Backyards: How Government Secrecy Harms Our Communities and the Local Heroes Fighting Back. I hear it's an excellent book. I haven't read it yet. We'll be able to talk to her in person. So I will update you over the summer as to the time and the location, but it'll be the evening of September 4th. Then our regular meeting will be on September 8th by Zoom. Is Marc here? Debbie Spielberg? So I'm going to try to move through this quickly because the storm is pretty terrible. I'm afraid about losing power. So we have been talking about this legislation for quite a while now here at the Civic Fed. And so after Marc and Debbie speak and tell us what they think about the current status, if you could keep your comments concise and brief and relevant questions on the topic, please. If you're angry and want to vent, do that in an email to me or call me up. I'm always all ears. So let me see. Is there no Marc yet?
Cheryl, is there a meeting next? Do we have a meeting next week, or this is the only one until September?
This is the only one until September.
Okay, great.
We'll be
Thanks.
sending out email updates and information as it develops, but we won't have a meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome, Alcar. Hey, Liz, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Oh, good, Mark is here. Where's Mark now?
I'm here.
Here, okay. Okay with you if we get started while we wait for Debbie?
Yeah.
Okay,
That would be on in a second, actually.
okay, I'll wait then. You feeling better, Mark?
Getting there.
Oh,
Sort of
okay. Well, that's good. Getting there is
working my
better.
way through this stuff.
Oh,
Not fun.
sorry.
Mark, what do you have?
Um, what did I have? I had an overactive parathyroid gland where they took out one of the four lobes to reduce the amount of hormone I was producing, so I could reduce the amount of calcium that was going into my blood. That was the first thing, and then I just had a s- a gland under my skin that had gotten infected, and they had to take that out, and that was like a 5-inch incision. So I had general anesthetic twice in the space of I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Oh, no.
Oh
Um,
dear, so sorry.
but I feel
Well,
mostly functional.
bless your heart. Thank you for telling us.
Uh, it is what it is. Good thing is nothing had an underlying problem. Each these are distinct, independent craziness events.
Okay, well, I'm gonna skip a lengthy introduction, so we can move through this meeting pretty quickly. You all know Marc Elrich. He's been a good friend to the Civic Federation. He comes every time we ask him to come. He's here tonight to talk about 2502. Anything else on his mind about housing in particular only, please? And and he obviously, you all know, he's our county executive in his second term and has had a long history of public service in this county. And on that, I'll ask you to start, Mark.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been an interesting time in Montgomery County.
Yeah,
And I'd say
no
that,
kidding.
yeah, I mean, I think it's actually a really disturbing time. You want me to just talk mostly about housing? I'll talk almost all about housing. Um, and about planning, because I think the fundamental problem is planning, and it starts there. And the problem you have is, first of all, Thrive was concocted during the middle of COVID. And so you had none of the public process that you ever would have had if you hadn't been in the middle of COVID. And that was very deliberate by the planning board. If I were a conspiracy theorist, I would say they brought us COVID deliberately, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But what they did is use COVID as a cover up to say they had to go forward with urgency for which there was none to do what they were doing with Thrive. And it left a lot of residents out of the discussions. They simply were not part of the discussions and weren't part of the discussions in a meaningful way. The Zoom meetings and the amount of time people were allowed to interact, you're not in a room, you're not talking to people face to face, you're not looking at things on a board. Maybe you see them on your screen in miniature reduction to what they actually would look like if you were in person. And it created the basis for everything else that follows. Thrive was a complete reversal of the corridors and wedges plan, the existing master plan. So they not only updated it, they basically decided to walk away from it. And that began the start of your problem. Now, when residents got upset about where this was going, they were told, and the plan says that this is like a vision, for lack of a better word, and it's not, what's the word? It's not, it wasn't created to tell you what was going to happen. It was a guidepost that people could refer to, and that they would go through the master plan process to implement it. And this is where things have gotten now to the point of being really ridiculous. They've completely violated every master plan in Montgomery County. Every single one, with the addition of these new corridors all over the county. Basically, what they've done is say master plans don't matter. And they are trying to carve out these zones along the corridors. 2502 is ultimately related to this because the first thing is what they do on the corridor. And then what they do in the corridor plans, like University Boulevard, is then step inside the corridor. So they're pretending like all these things don't exist, and they're doing them sequentially. And so you've got a situation where none of the master plans call for this. None of the plans, if you'd been under normal master plan process, the roads would have been included, or those neighborhoods would have been included in discussion of the master plan. By hiving this off and saying this is just about the corridor and it's just the street, they've hived it off from any connection to the underlying master plan, even though it's going to have profound effects on the underlying master plan. And so, in my mind, what they've done is basically destroyed planning as a citizen-driven process in Montgomery County. And if I were a resident, I would be very worried about that because I served on, for example, the Silver Spring sector plan when I was living in Tacoma Park. And when Doug did the transportation task force, I was on the transportation task force. What used to be the process in Montgomery County was involvement of citizen groups. So when we were doing the Silver Spring sector plan, we met as a group. You had groups of residents with different points of view. Trust me, mine was not the only point of view on that committee. We had different points of view, and you had business people and developers, and staff served as support to the residents who were working on the plans. Staff might provide a setting. What's the problem we were trying to solve in Silver Spring? In Silver Spring, they were trying to solve that despite all the zoning they had put in place, the development they wanted didn't happen where they thought it should have happened and was happening other places. And so they needed to make changes in the zoning. But we all sat and we all talked about these things and we voted on these things. So the recommendations of the committee were done by vote and sent forward to the planning board and then forward to the council. So you can't understand what you've lost until you know what you've lost. And I think that what they're taking advantage of is there are a lot of people in this county who have no idea what a master plan process looks like. They might go to the master plan and say, what does my neighborhood look like? Do I want to live in this neighborhood? What's planned for this neighborhood? They don't know how that plan was created. And now they're dealing with changes in neighborhoods that have nothing to do with using a master plan process. And so I can go in and basically what you have is a bunch of planners who have no attachment to the community going in and deciding that we don't like single family homes, we don't like single family neighborhoods, and we're going to change your neighborhood, which is something nobody apparently has asked for. And residents aren't going to have any way to vote on this and say they're not going to even be involved in the process as in a committee where they have the right to vote and the right to opine on things. So for me, the biggest loss in this, the first big loss in this anyway, is the loss of process. And if I were a resident, if I were the Civic Fed, I'd be demanding a return to master plan processes and citizen involvement, which is how we built supposedly this great county with all these master plans, which the planning board would always tell you We got award after award for these master plans. You got awards for plans, and the plans were based on work that came out of the community. So I would say, my first ask is to stop everything and go back to doing whatever work you're going to do, whatever you want to study, go back to studying it through the master plan process, not through this process, and not to artificially carve off the corridors from everything else in the community, because it's not like the corridors don't affect the community. That's kind of my starting point on this. And I've known a lot of you for a long time. We've all been through different master plan discussions at, different parts of the county. This is unlike anything we've ever done. And the council needs to hear that. And residents need to hear that, because I don't think a lot of residents understand that with what the council's done, they've basically taken residents out of this equation completely. And what I worry about, I was just looking over the list of roads that they've upgraded to facilitate the corridors. And what I find really concerning is, since there's no rationale for this, there's nothing to stop Andrew, who, by the way, has no qualifications for having done this in the first place. There's nothing to stop him or anybody else from adding other roads to this. So neighborhoods that are safe today could be changed tomorrow, because you've now introduced complete arbitrariness and no citizen input. So this is not the way to do planning in Montgomery County. And it's also interesting where he doesn't go with the corridors, because it says a lot about where they think this ought to be. We did a study, I just had it done, because I was interested in, if you're trying to provide additional housing, you want it close to jobs. And my first reaction is, why the hell would you start with University Boulevard, which is close to no jobs? Silver Spring has not been zoned to become an office center. It's mostly been zoned to become a residential center. University Boulevard, the only jobs between Langley Park and Wheaton are primarily not office jobs or skilled labor or high-end jobs. They're basically retail and service jobs. So this is not a jobs corridor. Almost all the jobs are planned for the I-270 355 corridor. That's where people expect most of the job growth to be in the county. It was also where they expected most of the housing growth to be in the county. So this changes all that. And that gets to the second thing that I kind of frame out, which is that the county's had a growth policy, and we do this in conjunction with the Council of Governments, and we get these forecasts that are done on 5-year intervals for over a 30-year horizon. So we're in round 10.2, and round 10.2 runs from 2020 to 2050. And if you read this, you discover that we've already zoned for 85,000 or more housing units than we have today. So when people say we need to do this because we need to have housing, we've already zoned for it. So you've got all these master plans that have not been fully built out. White Oak is one of them. White Flint is another one. The plan they did for White Flint 2 area is another one. There are plans up and down Rockville Pike and 270 that are for future development of Montgomery County. And there are 23 activity centers which were zoned for increased development. None of these involved going into existing neighborhood to knock down houses in order to build housing that we needed in Montgomery County. These are all things that the county designed and planned to accommodate future growth in the county. That's why we did this. That's why we planned on a 30-year horizon, and that's why it actually accommodates more jobs and more people that are projected to come here. So when this all started back in 2018, 2019, it kind of started out of something that came from the Council of Governments declaring that we had to have these housing targets in Montgomery County because we didn't have enough housing. Since the time they made those targets, the projections for future growth in the county in both housing and jobs have been drastically reduced. None of the reduction in that growth that triggered that initial report has been taken into account in any of the work the planning board has done since then. So they use that as a reason to do more. And then when it turns out that those numbers aren't what anybody thinks are going to happen anymore, what they're projecting is fewer housing and fewer jobs, they've made no effort to revise their projections because it doesn't fit their narrative. And that to me is an intellectual problem and also a factual problem. And then to make matters worse, we've got two letters from the Council of Governments about whether or not jurisdictions needed to rezone to meet these new housing goals. And what they said is you already have enough existing housing in your master plans. You do not need to rezone. So you got a letter from the Council of Governments planning people telling everybody that relax, you don't need to rezone because you've already zoned for this. Montgomery County, I'd say basically the counties in this region are different than some of the other places in the state of Maryland. There's this controversy in the state about a housing policy and about there are jurisdictions that will zone on the spot to prevent a development. That is not something Montgomery County does. And so the county is actually planned for all the jobs and all the future growth on a 30-year horizon. And the planning board is pretending like that doesn't exist. So what they're doing is ripping into existing neighborhoods, claiming we must do this to provide the housing needs for the county and ignoring the work that was done to provide the housing needs for the county. My personal theory is that there are people in the development community, and this is not being backed by the big high-rise developers, the people who build the big buildings. This is basically that the townhouse builders are looking at the single-family neighborhoods as the next greenfield, because Montgomery County doesn't have a lot of greenfields left unless you're going to go into the ag reserve. So if you're not going into the ag reserve, the next greenfield is let's densify the single-family neighborhoods. So when I looked at the university corridor and what they're planning for that, it was evident that there are no jobs planned, no substantial jobs planned in the university corridor, and yet they're talking about putting all this additional density in the corridor. So I'm trying to frame this so that you have some sense of the context in which it's happening in, and have some ammunition to say that when people say we're doing this because we need to zone for more housing, we've actually already done it. And it's, the nice word I would use is a lie. They're basically misleading people. They misled people about that we were going to go through master plan processes. Now they're not doing it. They're claiming they need to do this because we don't have enough housing. Well, we've already zoned for it. So rather than examining why housing isn't being built, they simply decide, well, we'll just go into a brand new place, the existing neighborhoods, and we'll zone that for additional density. I'm not a big fan of that. And to me, it's a problem that, we're doing things like this. So then you get to Andrew's thing, which comes out of nowhere. It's a product of him and Natalie. And it basically decides that we're going to take our roads and designate them corridors. And there are very few true corridors in Montgomery County. And I looked at, I was looking at the Minneapolis plan to see what they had done. And basically, because Minneapolis is a city, you've got roads that stretch for miles and miles and miles, start at one end of the city and they go to the other end of the city. DC is an example, with their numbered streets on the east and west side, you've got roads that run from south to north, north to south in DC for long expanses that traverse the county, traverse the city. In Montgomery County, your north-south roads in the county are Wisconsin Avenue forever up to Frederick. Connecticut Avenue from the district line, but only as far as Aspen Hill. Georgia Avenue goes forever. University Boulevard goes from Prince George's County to Wheaton, and then it goes no further. And Langley, and then New Hampshire Avenue goes forever, but basically to a rural area that's not built up. And on the east-west corridors, you've got East-West Highway, you've got Randolph Road, and you have virtually nothing else down county that goes all the way through. And you got University Boulevard, which with the long loop eventually connects University Boulevard to Connecticut Avenue. And then you got Veers Mill Road, which goes from Wheaton to Rockville. That's your east-west connectivity in the county. That is your east-west connectivity. So you don't have a grid of streets and you don't have true corridors. So they've basically, Andrew's just decided if something's, you know, has any length at all, we're going to call it a corridor. And therefore, because it's a corridor, it should get denser treatments. But these things aren't truly corridors. They're not rich in jobs because we developed the way we did. Our jobs are in centers. They're not spread out along these roads. I just got back from Montreal. You're in a Montreal neighborhood. There are streets that are lined with retail. They have retail that goes on for many, 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 many blocks and goes through different neighborhoods. Montgomery County was built on a suburban model, so you've got centers. So Four Corners has a shopping center, has 2 grocery stores in that area there. You've got the plaza at Wheaton. You've got the shopping centers in Langley Park, but you do not have anywhere in the county continuous roads that are lined with retail. There's not a single road in Montgomery County that looks like a typical city road. They just don't exist here. Wisconsin Avenue is just lined with malls, but it's not with, street level shopping and where's, local businesses that people can walk into. So you got a very different pattern in Montgomery County. And so picking off all these neighborhoods, this starts out with a discussion about more housing now. There's no now to something that relies on every single homeowner to sell their house or to make a decision, I'm going to try to turn my house into a duplex, which means you have to go live someplace else while you knock down your house and build a duplex. Most houses are centered on their lots. And so if you have an R60 lot with, 60-foot width and you got a 40-foot house or a 48-foot house, you wind up with about 6 to 10 feet on either side of the house. You're not going to fit a house in back there. So the only place to put a second house is to build onto the back of your house and replicate your first house on the backside. And there goes the yard. And then you've got to put parking back there, and there goes more of the yard, and you pretty much wind up with no green space. It's hard to say this is going to be very desirable. And your alternative would be to knock down your house and build two units side by side. The plan the plan requires no affordable housing. So for all the blather about this is about affordable housing and we need to meet these housing needs, there's no single requirement for affordable housing in there. If you decide to build a triplex instead of a duplex and you build that third unit, then you have to meet one of the workforce housing requirements. But unless they changed the plan, it was the higher workforce housing requirement was the first trigger, which I think serves a family of 4 earning up to $192,000. If you make that much money, you can actually afford to rent an $8,000 house. It's kind of stunning where they've gone with this. So I look at this and I'm very uncomfortable with why and how they're doing it. So you're only going to get any kind of workforce housing if you build 3 units. And if I'm a developer on an R60 lot and my choice is 3 townhouses that are 16 feet wide, which leaves you with 6 feet on each side of it, which is not even enough to put a driveway in there, then 2 of them are going to be market rate and one of them is going to be basically, because workforce housing is often priced very close to market rate, it's going to be very close to market rate and you're going to wind up with not much in the way of affordability. And if I'm a developer, I'm probably building 2 24-foot wide townhouses and not having any responsibility for building the less expensive townhouse, because I can make more money on 2 larger townhouses than I'm going to make on 3 skinny townhouses. 16 feet is not a great width for, a townhouse. They do it, but this is not what a high-end townhouse looks like. And if you do it on an R90 lot, then you're got a 90-foot width in your lot and you've got more freedom to do this. But you could build the bigger units, but you're still going to have to build one that's more affordable than the other. And you can build quads and whatever. And if you assemble lots linearly, you can actually build up small apartment buildings. The idea that this is suddenly going to produce more housing now, they should just drop the word now out of the proposal because there is no now. And if Andrew and them were that concerned about the lack of workforce housing, they should add the workforce housing requirement to the MPDU requirement and require developers when they're building their high rises to include this so-called badly needed workforce housing in the middle of our job centers where it was the most appropriate place to locate it, rather than not requiring it within our job centers, no workforce housing in downtown Bethesda, and doing it, along these roads in single family neighborhoods primarily. It's just not something that I think makes, a whole lot of sense. And I'm not sure that, other people feel like it makes a whole lot of sense at this point. I think that's why everybody's, concerned about it. And I think, people are realizing that they've been cut out of the process. So I don't think anything's going to happen quickly. I don't think you're going to get much truly affordable housing. So it's not going to address the greatest need the county has, which is truly affordable housing. There is no actual shortage of housing. This is, there's been a lot of debate. Finally, recently, people are realizing that this mantra that you need more housing, it is not based on an actual shortage of housing. There are not 30,000 people living on the street in Montgomery County. Our homeless people are homeless because they're mostly also jobless, and many of them have other issues that makes it hard for them to support themselves. But they're not going to be served by this housing at all because they need housing that's even cheaper than an MPDU. There are not people who are there just aren't people out there who are not housed. Basically, our population is housed. If we haven't had housing growth, the number one reason we don't have housing growth is we have not had job growth. And that we have not had job growth for the last 15 years. Now, we've been able to make progress in life sciences, but the progress we make there is offset by the closure, for example, of Lake Forest Mall and White Flint Mall, because there you lose 1,000 jobs or so in each one of these malls, and those jobs are gone. And people need jobs. People don't move to a place unless they have a job. And so the slowdown in jobs in Montgomery County has led to a slowdown in housing growth. And it's absolutely true. It's actually not just Montgomery County. People are seeing this regionally. There's just less demand for housing because there's fewer people coming to live here to work here. And you don't move to a place if you don't have a job. So you're not moving into a new house and then say, I'll figure out how to get my job later. You figure out where you want to work, and then you make a decision where you're going to move to. So this is it's a solution to a problem that isn't really the problem that we're facing. And relying on the market, this is, if you read the Koch brothers stuff on housing, this is basically what the Koch brothers are proposing, is that you release the restrictions on where you build things and just let the market build. And in their dream world, eventually affordable housing gets created when older housing is given up by people who have enough money to move into new units, and then landlords can allow those units to deteriorate to the point when they can afford to rent them to people with lower incomes. That's a terrible way to get affordable housing, but it also is not a way to get affordable housing fast. So I don't see this producing the workforce housing that they're talking about, and I don't see it producing the affordable housing that everybody's talking about. And, we've been able, well, I would say that the people who are countering this narrative are pointing out that if you want affordable housing, you actually have to require it. And then you actually have to build it. And the government may have to play a larger role, and we've played a larger role in building affordable housing in the county. We're going to be proposing changes to the MPDU law that would increase the number of units you have to provide, but require more at the lower end that we don't provide at all right now, but also more at the higher end, going up to 90 or 100% of area median income, so that there's a mix of incomes that we can build housing for people who cannot get housing or find housing at their incomes. If you make more than $80,000 and you're a single person, you're not getting an MPDU. and you're gonna have a hard time finding an apartment. And that's what families are struggling with. Individuals, the situation's a little bit different, but if you're a family and your incomes are, under $100,000, it's extraordinarily difficult to live here. I think the affordability guidelines now say that you have to be at some point around $110,000 in Montgomery County to be able to afford a house if you're a family of four, or afford rent if you're a family of four. So happy to talk and just answer questions people have. This is just I think do you have my letter on workforce housing?
We
Sure.
do, and we distributed it to the members.
So some of you have had the chance to read that, I hope. I tried to, go into all these different issues that get raised by this. And, my rejoinder, and I talked with one of the planning board members I interviewed yesterday, Mitra, and I basically said, I don't understand why you are not looking at why you have 34,000 units in the pipeline that are already approved that haven't been built. If you have a housing crisis, how come the developers aren't building for this so-called housing crisis units that they've already approved? These are all the developer has to do for these 34 units is go in and pull a building permit. And they could build those apartment buildings, but they're not doing it. And then you've got all these units in the master plans, the 85,000 unbuilt units in the master plans, and that's Park and Planning's number. That's not my number. They're not looking at that and saying, what would it take to do to get those units built? And, my suggestion to Mitra was, if I'm concerned about the housing types we're allowing in Montgomery County, I would go into these neighborhoods, these master plans that aren't built out, and I would build them out with the housing types you want and see what happens before you decide you're going into neighborhoods. So what kind of questions can I answer for you?
Barry Wides, go ahead.
Mark, thanks for your remarks and thanks for joining us tonight and hope you feel better. But the thing I wanted to raise was regarding Viva White Oak and the TIF. I think the TIF is a good idea. We're supporting it. But question I have for you is there a reason why we couldn't also use the TIF monies to support arterial roads that are going to need to be improved, when we get, 4,700 units on the Viva White Oak property? It's a pretty challenging property from a ingress and egress because the FDA is on one side and the Army's on the other, and there's just two ways in and out, and one of them is onto US 29, which is a mess already. So interesting your thoughts on that.
So, as you know, I was on the council when that master plan was done.
Yeah.
And this development fits within that master plan, and including the analysis of the roadways there. You and I might differ about whether or not Park and Planning properly accounted for what's happening on the road. I do think if he builds the business part of this, which is supposed to be, this was all supposed to be about jobs. The what people wanted on the east side of the county was jobs over there. So I'm hopeful, and I've talked with him a few times, that they're going to build the thing out and have actual jobs there to go with the housing. It was not supposed to be a housing only development. If we're going to have to accommodate BRT differently, we have to make it, it's running in mixed traffic. And so we've got plans already in the budget to move it out of mixed traffic and to get it into its own dedicated lanes so it can offer people a transit alternative. As long as you're stuck in traffic from New Hampshire Avenue into, the district or into Silver Spring, there's not a lot of an advantage to get on a bus if the bus has its own lane.
All right. Thank you.
Barry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, my thing said Mike was muted. I was afraid I was talking and
Yeah, I
nobody.
lost you.
No, we heard you. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. So I was worried.
Yeah,
So
no, I heard you. Thank you.
We can look at that again. If we could pull up the work that was done on the master plan and the traffic studies
Yeah.
to see what they anticipated. There is, there are some simple things. You know the area pretty well. I mean, the simplest thing they could do is you get a big pinch over there because the road narrows by a lane when you go over New Hampshire Avenue. And there is a way to accommodate that lane across the bridge so that you can maintain all the lanes on New Hampshire, all the lanes on 29 going south with
Mhm.
that pinch point when you get to New Hampshire Avenue. And I've talked to staff and I've talked to, our transit traffic planners about how to deal with it. And it is a relatively easy solution for that part of it. And I do think getting BRT into dedicated lanes will have a positive impact on it.
Mhm.
I don't know what you would do to widen to provide more capacity other than that, because once you get inside of New Hampshire Avenue and above Northwest Branch, you'd have to start taking away people's front yards to add lanes on each side of the road. And I don't particularly want to do that.
Yeah,
We tried to stay away from that.
yeah. I mean, I think there's a plan on the books to build an interchange on Cherry Hill at I-95, and that would take a lot of the traffic to 95 away from 29, and you could also do a BRT to Greenbelt if they did that. But I think it requires the state, Prince George's, and Montgomery working together on this. So I've been in discussions with PG County and our folks, and I think there's some alternatives besides just putting people on 29. So,
Look,
well,
I'm more than happy to have those discussions, seriously.
good. All right. Well, I'll let somebody else talk. Thanks very much, Mark.
But
Okay.
if you want to sit down and just get a refresher on what was in the master
Oh,
plan.
I did that today with Andrew Bossi, actually. I read it today. We went over it today.
Cool.
We're moving that direction.
You're consistent.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
I see some things in the chat, several things about investors buying houses and the implications of that. And I'm wondering if anyone's ever asked the Department of Taxation to run a computer search of all the homes in the county that are owned by investment trusts or LLCs or whatever, so we could keep track of it over time.
We haven't done that, but I could ask my staff if they can do that. I mean, in the world of AI, you would think that would be a doable
Right.
project to do a search like that. I'm concerned that about who's going to lose their housing, because a lot of this housing is occupied by minorities. When I think about Upper Georgia Avenue and I think of University Boulevard, I know who lives there. It's different than who lives along Connecticut Avenue, for example. And the idea that parking planning's idea was to start there is a little bit disturbing, given their previous history of doing upzoning in places and trying to upzone existing affordable housing units and turn them into high rises that would not be affordable. It would not be surprised me if we're seeing a repeat of a pattern of trying to remove affordable housing from the county. But it's concerned me for a while, and I've expressed this to the planning board directly.
Okay. Danila has his hand up. Danila, go ahead.
Well, I think, all right. Since Mark, you made such a great case for the fact that this is clearly not about housing, can we come up with just one word describing what it is really truly about? I mean, can we use the word sprawl? Can we just say this is about sprawl, and we created MNC PPC to prevent sprawl, and now they're telling us that sprawl is the only answer, or some other word that we could
Look,
come
I
up
would
with?
say hypocrisy is the word that comes to my mind. I mean, think about this. We focused on transit-oriented development.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we're building development that's not transit-oriented. There is no plan for the BRT anytime soon to come down University Boulevard. And in terms of a priority, it would be low on the priority list because it doesn't connect people to the jobs. Whereas, ferrying people down 355 and things that connect to 355, this is your jobs corridor. This is where you're going to make your major investment to start with. So to me, between the density they say they had to put in the urban areas, just pull their words from describing why they're putting all this density in Bethesda, then go back and research the 23 activity centers, which were created specifically to house denser populations around a place where they could concentrate services and jobs so that people could live there, work there, eat there, and not have to drive. So this abandons the activity center approach to things. And I think about Wheaton, because Wheaton's already, is not developed at all. You got this master plan, they put high rise over all the property up there as much as they could. And, virtually nothing's been built except the building by the Safeway, right?
Yep.
So what happens to Wheaton if you bleed off a bunch of people with incomes that can let them buy a single family house in a neighborhood? And then all of a sudden, those households aren't available to move into Wheaton, into what were supposed to be the nicer townhouses and nicer apartments that were going to get built there. You're not going to get the development of Wheaton the way it was planned in the master plan. These things, you're competing for the same person who wants to live in Montgomery County. And if they don't go into the urban centers, which you've designed, and we've got urban centers that have not blossomed yet, and you open up for developers to go into neighborhoods, you may wind up finding that you're not ever going to get the people into the places you planned on putting them. And they refuse to talk about this, and they refuse to think about it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've been telling folks in Kensington Heights, Mark. That is exactly the right argument. And if I could just follow up, can you just talk about the costs to all of this? Because we're talking about really the details, but like what are people facing? Because we really need to explain this, right, to our neighbors and like air quality or traffic or higher taxes or inability to get ambulances through neighborhoods because the streets are too narrow, and that's our problem in Kensington Heights. If this is all getting upzoned, our streets literally will not be able to handle an ambulance passing through if people park on both sides of the street. So can you talk about the really ramifications of this horrible policy that is institutionalizing sprawl?
So when they did when they did Thrive, the county government's responsibility in that process, because they consulted us as little as humanly possible, was to do the estimate for the infrastructure costs. And so I can get this and provide it to you so you can see what we sent to the council back then. I don't have it handy right now, but basically when we told the council and the planning board was there, what the infrastructure costs were going to be, the thoughtful response, not the planning board, the council, the thoughtful response from Casey Anderson, who's the architect of this stuff, and Hans Riemer, was that we don't believe your cost estimates. That was their definitive rebuttal to being told what it was going to cost to build this infrastructure. So if you go down, say, University Boulevard, and you increase the number of houses on there and the sewer capacity and everything else, you're going to, first of all, you're going to increase the impervious surface. You're going to double the footprint of the houses. So you've now, 100% increase in imperviousness just there. And then because you're not parking in front and they want these mid-block cut-throughs, you need a 15-foot alley that's going to come out of the lots on the side facing University Boulevard. And then the alley, you have to be able to make a left turn into a parking space or a right turn into a parking space. So now you've got a parking space that's going to be 20 feet deep, and you're probably going to have 2 per house. So 4 for a duplex. How's this going to work? You're going to have massive imperviousness. The water's going to hit the streets. You're going to get rid of your tree cover because existing trees are not compatible for what they're planning. So it's going to cost serious money. And this is not something you fix easily. This is something where it's going to require digging up the street and, putting in deeper pipes. And you can't just, this is where they're way too simplistic. It's like, oh, well, we'll make the person building the house is going to have to fix the stormwater. Their pipe may may handle their increased flow of water only until it runs into the pipe at the next house that doesn't redevelop. And then all of a sudden you got more water than that pipe can handle. They're not thinking about this systemically. If you were gonna do this, you would plan it like you would plan any other development, like we're planning like what Bramble has to do in Viva White Oak. He has to go in and put in an entire stormwater system for what he anticipates is going to be the load of the stormwater. Here, you're not going to have to do that, which is a frightening possibility. This doesn't even include if they go through with the corridor plans where they now build deeper into the neighborhoods and do this, replicate the density there, which makes that worse. They talk about BRT. You're either going to lose a lane on University Boulevard, which, you could do it. I'm not totally against doing it, but if you decide that that's too much of a lift, politically, you're going to wind up shrinking the front yards. Now, the owners aren't going to care because they're going to be selling their property for this increased density, and they'll sell the land to the county for BRT, but you're going to wind up with an extra lane on 2 lanes on these roads, which will further increase the imperviousness. And by the way, I would have to change the location of some of the storm drains and the piping because the inlets to the pipes, which are underneath where the storm drains are, could no longer be the inlets if I have to widen this road. Now I've got to move the inlets and I've probably got to move the piping. So this is not at all going to be cheap. And there you're just talking about the infrastructure. And then you're building in the denser parts of the county. So if I'm adding kids here, I'm adding kids in the hardest places to add additional capacity to the schools. I don't have the luxury in Crown Farm where in this new master plan community, they set aside a site for a new high school to handle all these people. Somehow these people the planning board actually believes that people are going to walk a half mile to a bus stop. Probably not happening. And it's a real problem if that's what people are thinking, because people don't walk or bike when it's raining, when it's snowing, when it's extremely hot, or when it's extremely cold. So they all become drivers. For all the believers there are, the number of people I see riding a bike in a raincoat in a storm is like close to zero, if not one. So this is just, it's unrealistic what they think they're going to do. And you got to look at where people get their money. This is Andrew's stuff, remember? And where does Andrew get his campaign money for? He's not publicly financed. Has anybody looked at how much money is in his account and where the money's coming from? Somebody ought to, because it's like about a couple of $1 million and it's almost all from developers. So his consultations aren't with the community. He didn't go out and say, hey, folks, I got this great idea. What do you think if he put apartments up here? What do you think if he built duplexes over here? All he did was find out if their builders interested in doing this. And so if I facilitate this, will this make you happy? This is not the way you do planning.
All right, I'm sorry, Deborah, you're up next. You're muted. Deborah, unmute yourself. Okay.
Here I am. Sorry.
Right.
Trying to be respectful and kind of mess that up. So it's interesting. Of the roads that you mentioned, I've driven many of them because, like many people, I worked in DC. And I live off of New Hampshire Avenue. And I can tell you that they're planning now, a new thing at Park and Planning is they want to put 145 townhouses on New Hampshire Avenue and Notley Road. While they've already, Metro bus has been cut. It's not coming up even as far as us anymore. It's only going to Randolph. So again, you're gonna walk a mile to a bus? No, most people will not. Notley Road is a one lane each way. So I do agree that this is an issue. And having grown up in an urban center, I grew up in Brooklyn. So all about jobs and dense housing. And this does not strike me as anything that even comes close to helping people No, they talk about young homeowners. I've got a 26-year-old and a 24-year-old. They can afford to rent. They got a hunch, but they can afford to rent. And I don't see the kind of housing I would expect by like Glenmont Metro Station, affordable rents nearby, extremely unaffordable townhouses that were built right there where you could walk to the metro. So yeah, I agree with you, Mark. I agree. There's something wrong with this county council. And I believe a lot of what they're listening to are their friends too. Well, I can't afford to buy a house. Why? Why can't you afford to buy a house? Is it a job issue? Is it a spending issue? What is it that, people of our generation bought houses and moved up in houses? Why
Most
was that? Why?
most of
I
what
don't
they
know.
build, most of what they build is not going to be affordable. That's the part that's really irritating about this. You're going to get high-end market houses. When Park and Planning did a study, these are studies you guys can pull, by the way. They did a study in Silver Spring, East Silver Spring, and they said, what happens if you build a duplex or triplex on a single family house? And what came back was, and I can't believe they were surprised, but this also, in the context, they were doing this when they were calling it affordable housing instead of attainable housing. So they came back and they said, well, the new houses would be as expensive or more expensive than the existing houses in the neighborhood. So why the hell you think if you build over here triplexes and duplexes, you're going to get anything but things that are as expensive or more expensive than the stuff you've already deemed as being too expensive. So you're right. And the data's there. And by the way, if you look at their study of White Flint, when they asked developers up there why they weren't building, they said because the rents aren't high enough. So this is in White Flint and the rents aren't high enough, but it's not high. This is their problem. They zone too much high rise. And you cannot build affordable units in a high rise. It just doesn't work. The economics of building at $600 a square foot or whatever the hell it is right now is not a good economic. And so when they zone all this stuff for high rise, they wind up not being able to get affordable units. That goes to the other part of my suggestion, the Park and Planning, was they relook at all the high rise zoning they did and they zone some of that down. They leave the height around the core of the center around the metro, but you don't take all of Bethesda and blanket it in high rise. You lower the heights to somewhere between 7 and 10 stories where the stuff can be built at an affordable price. But as long as you're only building high rises, you're trying to push that everywhere. What you're going to get is basically very expensive development. And this is their fault. This is their doing.
Okay, great. Alan Myers, go
This
ahead.
is Clint Remine. Can I just say something about what Deborah just said? The reason they're putting 145 or 150 townhouses on Notley and New Hampshire Avenue is because there's one property that's on New Hampshire Avenue. And what they have done is they've joined 5 others properties by assemblage to that property, creating a 9-acre piece of property, which they're going to build 150 townhouses according to. And my suggestion right now is for everyone, this project is going to the DRC on July 15th. I urge everyone to be there and watch what goes on. And everyone has got, the DRC is a place where you can encourage them to investigate why projects like this won't work and to insist that the developer completely describe what he's trying to do and what his situation is, and for neighbors to come up and say this isn't going to work in our neighborhood. But I'll just say it: this scheme can be done in anywhere in the county. Buy
That's
one
right.
piece of property on a corridor, assemble 20 pieces of property behind it, and you got a 10-acre piece of property, and you can build whatever you want there. And there's no way to stop this.
And the beauty or ugliness of this is Andrew, Natalie, and any other council members can declare anything a corridor, short, long, whatever they say. It's a corridor, and if it's a corridor, you can do this. And to me, that's the outrage in all this. And this is not planning anymore. When council members can simply declare this is where we're going to build with no planning, no process, and no community involvement, you've gone way away from where Montgomery County used to be.
Okay, Alan Myers, go ahead.
Hi, Mark. I have a question for you relating to your experience on the council and what's going on here. When this first more housing now was first proposed, I sent Cindy Gibson an email saying, "Can somebody come talk to our civic association?" I'm in Maplewood, and got crickets.
Yep.
Nobody, no response. Then I see that Councilmember Friedson is having 3 informal information sessions to teach people and tell people about this proposal. And I attended one of the sessions. I don't know how many others on this conference tonight were part of those. But one of the things he said and made very clear, all the development would be within the existing lot lines, and about the only thing we would notice is about additional 5 feet in height, and it would all be optional method. Now I'm hearing discussions about building apartments by about crossing and buying up different lots to combine them, and maybe even building further back into the neighborhood. Isn't there a point in time where the council has to go back and say, "Hey, look, you had a public hearing on one set of parameters, which was everything would be within the lot lines. Now you're saying it's going to be cross lot lines."
So what I just read is you can combine up to 3 lots, I think, and which would give you 18,000 square feet, and you can build as many townhouses as you want to build inside 18,000 square feet. So there go the lot lines.
Yep.
The other thing I'd say is, this is only one of 2 things right now that are in the hopper. Right behind this, I mean, Andrew jumped this first, but right behind it is the corridor plans, and there's already one for university. So he can say whatever the hell he wants about this, but unless he says this is all we're going to do and we're going to kill the corridors, you're dead right, because in the corridor plan, you get the houses on the not facing the corridor, you get the houses on the other side of the block facing the first internal street, and you can put those things together. And so everything he says here would be evaporated under the corridor plans. And then, in the neighborhood around Four Corners, they go into the neighborhood with this crap. And, there's a strategy for getting people to leave a neighborhood, and it's to start bringing undesirable things into the neighborhood, things where you got buildings looming over your property line, or you got so much traffic on your street you don't want to be there anymore. And that's a great way to get people to surrender. And so I look at, the corridor plan as the first blow in getting people to want to get out of their neighborhoods. So eventually they ask you to rezone the whole thing because they don't want to live there anymore. You have every right to be concerned. You ought to ask Andrew, so are you going to kill the corridor plans? Because if you're not killing the corridor plans, everything he's saying is nonsense.
If he'll respond to me.
Well, go to one of his public meetings where he has to respond to you.
True.
Okay, Joyce Quads, you're next. Joyce?
Yeah, I'm going to actually go back to something you said in the beginning, which is the master plans. Having been involved in commenting on Thrive,
Yeah.
I probably can't count the number of times I and others requested that the requirement that zoning changes be done through master plans be included as part of Thrive. It was refused every single time. We even, if you look back, we rewrote the whole thing and included it in there, with comments and so on,
Right.
pretty lengthy. And, it was said, well, we have master plans, but that came across to me as clearly there was a goal there to do away with master plans.
Yes.
And, Casey was very unhappy with what had happened in the process of the master plan for downtown Bethesda, the Bethesda downtown plan, which actually, let's forget about the latest change, but actually for many years has worked well. People reached compromises. Nobody got everything they wanted, but those of us who live in adjacent neighborhoods got something we felt we could comfortably live with. But how do we get back to master plans? And there's probably no short answer to that, but to me, that's very important.
Here's the way you get back, and it's, and it's going to be painful, but I think you've got to make it very clear that this is a political issue and there's an election coming up. And, if none of these council members understand the value of master plans and understand the value of the community, then find council members who will. But that means that, some of you are going to have to step up if need be. and that if candidates do step up, you're going to have to help them. There are people right now putting together, civic organizations that want to deal with this on a broad level. And you all need to be engaged. It just can't be, I don't like this. What are you doing to us? There's got to be a willingness to make it political. There are two things that happened when I was on the council that are, kind of show how this works. One was the neighborhood of Aspen Hill. They were dealing with a Walmart proposal, and people were apoplectic about the Walmart and what Park and Planning was planning over there. And it was an election year, and they just put up a bunch of signs and made it very clear that, you vote for Walmart, there are no votes coming for you from here. And when we did 10 Mile Creek, and I was on the council, this is a particularly ugly story because I was on the council and they somebody brought forward a plan to move forward with developing the property up there, going to what was, I think, stage 3 or stage 4 of the development without meeting the requirements to go to the next stage. And they'd had conversations with 8 of the 9 council members, but not me. And the only reason I knew about it is one of the aides to one of the council members walked across the hall and asked me what I thought about it. And I said, "What do you mean what I thought about it? I don't know anything about it." Which is when I found out they had talked to everybody but me, and they were going to bring it up at a council meeting and pass it. And nobody was going to know what they were doing, and I would have no chance of being successful. As soon as I found that out, I went to my friends and, the environmental groups, told them what was being planned. And all remember that the drumbeat in this county of not to destroy Montgomery County's last clean stream. And we actually won. And it was a vote that if it had been taken when they wanted to take it, I would have lost 8-1. It was a vote that I won 9-0. So there's a way to get people to change their mind, but you've got to demonstrate the political will to make it costly if they don't change what they're doing. If all you do is complain and you don't do anything else, all you've reinforced is that you're not willing to do anything, so I don't have to worry about you.
Okay, Sharon, your hand has been up. Can you identify yourself?
Hi, I'm Sharon Candivan, and I'm in the North Four Corners area. And your remarks ring very true about the University Boulevard corridor plan. Things were dropped in at the very last moment. In November, the whole housing piece was dropped in right before the planning board hearing. At the very last work session, they increased the height from 75 to 100 feet for buildings in the Four Corners intersection. I'm pro BRT, but taking away a lane at that point, right before 30% of the traffic moves on to the Beltway, is insane. Now, I'm at the front of the line, but everybody behind me is going to be very upset. Um, they go deep into the neighborhood, as you've mentioned, along Dennis Avenue. They penetrate 1,200 feet into the neighborhood because, quote unquote, these courtyards, which are quite charming, with 20-foot tall houses, they count what in essence is 3 blocks as a single block because they're courtyards, not streets. Over 200 homes in this neighborhood would be eligible for upzoning. It's like way too much.
Well,
And
so basically, what they're telling you is, I don't care that you live there. I don't care that you pick this neighborhood. A bunch of planners, not people in this community, decided they wanted to be a different place for people to live because they're not willing to deal with where they've already got the zone capacity to do this. I'm with you guys totally on this. It is, and it's a nightmare because you do this here. They're already on Connecticut Avenue. People saw that Connecticut Avenue got included in these corridors. They're going to go into Kensington and do the same thing there.
well, again, on the, they talk about equity. This is East County, and they are focusing this on homes that sell for like 450, 475 in that area. And as you pointed out, this is considered, lower priced housing in this county for a single family home. So they will be, and their next
now they're going down University Boulevard toward Langley Park. Same thing. They are eliminating, probably the best source of quote unquote affordable single family housing in the county.
Look, anything I can do to help, if you would like me to come out and talk to your folks, I am more than happy to do that.
Well, unfortunately, we don't meet again until October, but I appreciate the offer.
Under the circumstances, I would try to get another meeting.
Uh-huh.
You don't have the luxury of time
Mhm.
because this is going to be in front of the council. So, you know, sometimes you got to have extra meetings.
Right. Yeah, well, that's true. But,
may be one
we
of
have
those times.
testified, everything I've said to you right now, I have said, in planning board testimony and on 2502, I basically made these points. So these points have been made. It's just made and ignored.
Well, now you got to make the council not ignore you.
Yeah.
But
That's-
the planning board's not elected. They don't have to worry about elections. The council's got to think about that.
Good point.
Vasna, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to ask you a question. It's switching gears to ZTA 2506, which is about the filling station. As you know, Kensington Heights Civic Association, which I'm a part of, we fought the Costco gas
Yep.
station many years ago. So we're trying to get our neighbors to try to, for the council to vote no on that and vote yes on the amendment that council member Fanny Gonzalez proposed. I was just wondering what your position is on that.
I haven't seen her amendment. I'm curious as to what's being proposed. I still have, there's been so much talking about where the line is going to be and the lack of clarity. I'm trying to get clear on what people are actually talking about because everybody I talk to seems to have a different perception of what's missing. And where does Fanny moves it from the canopy to the neighborhood, right?
To the boundary of the special exception area. So to the boundary of the zone, which is how it was supposed to be originally, and that's how it was measured from the nearest gas station infrastructure. So the Natalie Fanny Gonzalez amendment preserves the setback.
Yeah,
While the other amendments significantly shrink the setback by measuring from the fuel pumps.
but how much? So this is from the canopy, right?
Not from the canopy, from the boundary of the conditional use zone. So from the edge of whatever the gas station is, from the edge of the queuing or from the edge of whatever part of the gas station it is. So if a playground is nearby, you measure from the part of the gas station that is nearest to the playground.
I'm just wondering where that actual line is. That's what I have not been able to get clear.
Okay, well, it's when you apply for a permit, there is a zone that the applicant identifies that is called the conditional use zone for the filling station, and that edge of that zone on the map is where the setback is supposed to be measured from, which is to preserve the original intent of the law that you got passed
Right.
as your signature environmental, legislative achievement all those years ago, and so it's to preserve the intent of your original law. So that's what the Natalie Fanny Gonzalez amendment is. So we were hoping to get your support for that amendment.
So I think I like her amendment. I don't want to change what we put in effect before. I don't know what.
Okay.
There was something else about what's the word? Non-conforming use. And I'm trying to figure out what that means.
That's just a red herring. They're just trying to distract people with that because it's a reverse tautology. that it's just there to exactly confuse people. And we can send you a memo on
Yeah.
that. Don't want to distract from the rest of the conversation.
Send me the stuff.
Okay, will do. Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, Joan Bierweiler, go ahead.
Let's see, I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Mark, I wondered if you were aware that parts of people's property are being taken under eminent domain by the county along Veers Mill Road. This is because of the Veers Mill Road BRT, and it's for a shared use path on the north side of Veers Mill Road.
Yep.
Were you aware of that?
I knew, well, I figured they were going to have to take some property that way. How much are they taking?
Yeah, what?
Are they going, they're not going inside people's fences, are they?
Yes, they're taking parts of their property. So, a woman who was on the Aspen Hills Civic Association board lives on Adrian Street, which is runs parallel to Veers Mill Road on the north side of Veers Mill Road. And their properties, the homes on Adrian, their properties back onto Veers Mill Road. So our board member got a letter on Saturday that appraiser would appraise that portion of the property, her property, on the back of her property that was being taken, and she would be reimbursed for it. So she has the choice of getting together with the appraiser, or if she doesn't get together with the appraiser just appraises it and decides the amount. So yes, the back part of her property, we don't know how much of the property is being taken, and as near as I can figure, it's for a shared use path.
Yeah, bicycle and pedestrian.
Yeah.
I can ask my folks to show me what they're doing over there. Obviously don't have it in front of me right now.
Is there anything we can do about that, or do you think
I don't know whether I can get them to shrink it back inside the fence line. I didn't think they needed to go out and take people's property over there. So,
well, I'll say this. Veers Mill Road right there, there are going to be 2 lanes of cars going in one direction and 2 lanes going in another direction. And then on the north side, there's I went and looked at it this morning. It's about as wide as a lane. It's the shoulder. And that's going to be used for the bus, a dedicated bus lane. But then there's very close to that is the property line of these homes. So if they'd want any more lanes put in there, like a shared use lane, they're going to have to take people's property to do that.
yeah, the shared use lane is bike and pedestrian, not another car lane.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, I called it a lane. I don't know how wide it is. I don't know if it's 8 feet wide, 6 feet wide, 4 feet wide. I don't know.
Let me look at it and ask them where they're going. Is it necessary to get into people's property?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Bruce, go ahead.
Me?
Bruce.
Yes, thank you. Mark, I live in Kemp Mill, and we are apoplectic about the University Boulevard corridor plan. And we are having a neighborhood meeting with Natalie next week. I think it's on Wednesday, and I forget the time. It's probably about 7 o'clock. And yesterday I prepared questions, and you were absolutely perfect because you asked all the questions that are on my piece of paper, which I will send to you. But I was just wondering whether it might be possible for either you or a representative to come and hear what Natalie says next week.
What day is it?
I think it's Wednesday. I'll have to check it and
Be sure,
make sure.
get me the information for sure.
Okay.
And I will try to have somebody there. I always enjoy showing up for these things because they don't like it.
Thank you.
Okay, Liz Joyce.
Yes, first of all, the facts that you presented are just completely accurate from what I've been able to observe over all these years. And I also agree that this is a political issue. What is the political calculus for people on the council who automatically seem to go along with this? And you try to present them with these facts and they say, we need more housing. And of course, the facts that
You need more housing, but this is not the way to get it. You know, they're just not telling the truth. There's no other way to say that. They will not ask them why we have these master plans and why COG sent a letter saying you have enough capacity for the housing in your existing master plans. What makes them think that this is going to be that building a house along Georgia Avenue or University Boulevard is going to be more attractive than the planned developments we actually have inside the master plans that are waiting to be finished? I mean, I just think because I mean, it's frustrating because the truth is the real reasons they're doing things are political and they have to do with who pays for what in this county and you know where the political power is if it's not outside of you guys. And that's you know nobody wants to have well-funded candidates run against them. I have that experience.
Okay, Dowd, did I pronounce that right? Hello, Dowd,
Daoud,
Dowd.
your hand, there it is.
Now he's disappeared. Okay, Jerry Garson, go ahead.
Mark, how can we add more housing units when the entire stormwater system was built for the 10-year storm, and we now have the 100-year storm almost every year? Have we gotten rid of or eliminated the adequate public facilities? And if we don't care about flooding, we've seen what happened in Texas with flooding. Flooding is not a good thing for most people's houses.
Flooding is bad, Jerry. I think we can agree. Flooding definitely bad thing. In the areas where you're building new, like in the master planned areas where people are going to have to redo streets and stuff like that and put new facilities in, it's a lot easier to accommodate things there than it is to accommodate stuff along, University Boulevard or Georgia Avenue in a haphazard way when you're doing one house at a time. You'd have to undertake, if you were being honest, you'd have to undertake a massive project extending from one end of this thing to the other and making sure you've got not only capacity to hold the water there, but you've got places for the water, outlets for the water that also won't overflow or flood. Like, you have to do things with the streams that this water goes into, because otherwise you gouge the streams and destroy the stream valleys. So this project, doing this is more complicated than park and planning or the council seems to think it is. But we know when we're dealing with the flooding we have already, there are no quick and easy ways of doing this. And we are going to have to, when we come back, we've hired a company, a company that does hydrological studies. They're studying the entire county, so they can figure out, where and how things are flooding, what are the sources of the floods, what do we need to do to deal with this problem. So that's happening in real time. The first report on the Sligo Creek envelope, which runs from Wheaton all the way down into Prince George's County, that's the first one that's going to be out, and then the others will come after that. And we'll be telling people what we think we have to do. So stay tuned. We're aware of that we've got a problem.
But quickly, Mark, sometimes our members say, they might be against the various proposals coming forward, but they do care about people who are struggling to get housing. And I know you've had another big win recently. You just announced another project you've been working on for a long time. Can you tell us how you made that happen?
Yeah, it was pretty simple. Park and Planning rezoned some property, and instead of putting the property up for sale to a developer, we decided we would be the developer, and we interviewed companies who bid, affordable housing companies that bid to do the developments. We brought in AHC, we brought in what's the Habitat, So different partners who specialize in affordable housing, and we were able to get a development that has 196 affordable units in it at various price ranges. We have a few I think 3 single-family homes. We've got condos that are ownership condos, and we've got rental units all combined together. So, and this is what we've been doing in general. We've been taking our parcels that the county does have control over, and we're putting them out there. We make the land available for free. We don't have debt on the parking lots. So, we'll make them available to developer, because if I charge them, then I wind up having to subsidize them when I try to make the units affordable. So it's kind of like, what's the point of taking a check from them and handing them a check back when we're trying to get the prices down to where it's going to be affordable? Building housing is not cheap, but we have been able to do that project and more, where we're getting higher levels of affordability. We actually are getting more affordability than the law requires us to get, because it is county property, so we have leverage. So as long as we control the property, we're able to exercise leverage. We will send a bill to the council that'll let them do the kind of things that we do by requiring it in law for everybody. But we're operating, in our world, as close to making sure we get affordability as we can.
And Viva White Oak is a big project, right? Is it 5,000 units of housing? Am I right?
There'll be about 5,000 units of housing.
Yeah.
And it'll be, he has affordable housing requirements. This isn't one, because it was done a long time ago, that I have a whole lot of control over. The things, where we have parking lots and garages, those are things where I have a lot of control over what the prices are going to be.
That's great. Okay, Lila or Lila Hammond, go ahead. Unmute yourself. You're still muted. All right, we'll come back to you, Lila. Dowd, go ahead.
Hey, trying again. Um, hey, Mark, thanks for your time this evening. I also live in Kent Mill, and that meeting Bruce referenced is July 16, 7 to 8:30 at Odessa Shannon Middle School. My question for you is, since you can't unilaterally veto the UBC plan, are there actions that you can take through budgeting or appointments, departmental coordination, or just trading other political things that the council members want to delay or stop its implementation?
So that's a funny question. The reason I was never county council president is that I could have gotten the votes if I was willing to trade votes for votes, and I would never vote for something I thought was wrong. So I decided I don't need to be council president if it means I have to vote for stuff I think is wrong. It's outside my outside my wheelhouse. I don't have a veto over. Well, I have a veto over the appointments, but they can override me. There are 2 planning board members when they come up again. I think they come up again while I'm still here, I will veto them. They are absolutely horrible. They're the ones that have talked about developers shouldn't listen to the citizens. We need to make these decisions. One of them, said, "I'm tired of listening to people." I'm sorry, if you want to serve on the planning board and you're supposed to be a citizen of Montgomery County on the planning board, serving the citizens of Montgomery County, please don't say you don't want to listen to people in Montgomery County. And you've got 2 board members who are very open about that. So they are a problem, but the council overrode me last time when I vetoed one of them, and I'm confident they would override me again, but it's a real problem. Now, this time, residents have more experience with these planning board members, and they could actually go to the council hearing and talk about the things these people have said publicly, which I think, if you're in a public place like they are and you say you don't want to listen to people, you shouldn't be in that place. But that won't help you with your immediate problem. I don't have the ability to control the finances of any of this. Anything in my budget, like if I tried to withhold money for a stormwater sewer, the council would simply put the money back in the budget and say, you're building the stormwater sewer. So I have very limited ability to magically do this, which is why ultimately this is political, and you all have got to exert your political weight to get the changes in this you need. And, changing the debate because everybody wants to do affordable housing, which is how they've managed to, wash themselves. There's some people do greenwashing, we know about whitewashing, and now you've got housing washing where people are hiding behind, oh, this is about affordable housing. And nobody wants to be against affordable housing. I'm certainly not against affordable housing. I put a lot of effort into getting it. But they're going to use that, and you've got to educate people in the community. These people have no intention of building affordable housing. Talk about park and planning, rezoning affordable housing in Bethesda for high rises, and the high rises had requirements for fewer affordable units than already existed on the ground, and they were getting quadruple the density that existed on the ground. You've got to get to people in the community to make them aware that what people are saying is simply not true, that we have the capacity in the county, talk about master plans. I'll try to make sure, I'll work with Debbie to get together little sheets we can shoot you that talk about capacity. I can show you the COG projections for growth that show that the projections they had back in 2019, 2000, beginning of 2018 are no longer the projections that are true. So what they're saying and who they say is coming here is absolutely not true. The job projections, not true. So I can help you with that, but you've got to help get this out to people in your communities so that they understand they're basically being taken for a ride, or I consider this a giant con job. I can help you get the tools, but you're going to have to help get that information out into the community.
Is Lilith still here?
Yes, I'm here, and thank you so much for being here with us. We really need to have this information. The gentleman before me is the question. That was the question I was going to ask you. So I think I'm covered. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, we just really, we just feel kind of, oh my gosh, what can we do? And how fast do we have to go? How fast can they go? I mean, how long does it take them to go? Go ahead.
They can go really fast. They put this.
That's it.
They put Andrew's thing on speed dial.
Oh.
I mean, none of all this stuff could have waited to the fall. All this could have waited to the end of the summer when people were back. They could have had community meetings. They could have done something scary, like gone out to each one of these neighborhoods or communities and held a meeting there and talked to people and seen what people thought.
Mm-hmm.
They chose not to do any of that. And planning board, whose job it is to do that in the first place, didn't do it at all.
Allison, can you introduce yourself and ask your question?
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. I'm Allison. I live in Kent Mill. I've sent a email to the planning board back, I believe, in March, that detailed what I liked and what I didn't like in the original draft, and my comments were definitely not implemented in the revised draft. And I've forwarded a copy of that email to Natalie Fani Gonzalez's office at their request. After I told them I had comments on the board thing. But one, you mentioned, county property, developing county property, but in Kent Mill, not in where there's University Boulevard plan, but along Kent Mill Road, there's Spring Mill Field House, which has a very, very, very large field next to it, which is currently completely in disuse. And MCPS has permitted the vegetation to overgrow completely surrounding the field. So the sidewalk on that side of Kent Mill Road is in front of Spring Mill Field House is essentially unwalkable at the moment.
Where's that on Kent Mill Road?
It's Kent Mill and Fulham. It's basically halfway between Arcola and Kent Mill Synagogue.
Okay.
It's a small property. I think originally it was an elementary school back when it was built probably 60, 70 years ago. I think that it's all administrative offices at this point.
Right.
And I have a feeling it'll be closed when MCPS finishes their office rebuild, because they're supposed to fully consolidate in Rockville.
Aren't there 2 daycares in there?
No, there's Yeshiva of Greater Washington Boys Middle School currently in there, but they're doing a campaign to increase the size of their current building so that they can move their middle school boys back into their building. So the only thing I believe that's in there right now, other than like special education offices, is the Yeshiva of Greater Washington Boys Middle School. And the field is I think most often used at night for likely illicit activities, given that I see multiple cars drive around the back parking lot in the evening by themselves when nothing else is going on, and then come out together at the same time. but there's currently no apartments, like single level units at all in Kent Mill other than University Towers and the Warwick. And there's other people want to be able to walk to Kent Mill Synagogue as they age, and they have no ability to do that without navigating stairs. And so I've been trying to be like, there's this beautiful property here that you could make, garden style apartments on, and people in like the first floor could still have single level living and get to KMS. And then you have your apartment.
Do you want me to
condo.
pursue this property from the school system? Because I will.
I mean, I would be awesome because they also don't maintain it. Like the biggest issue for me walking there is that I hit sticks and brambles and thorns. They literally let thorns overgrow the sidewalk, which is incredibly unsafe for our kids and for us. And I have tried getting them to cut it. They ignore it. And so they are not maintaining the property. The building is not maintained fully. And it's just a terrible property. So that would be a great use of public space for an apartment building that could be like any income level. And I mean, I know that like multiple seniors in Kent Mill have said if there is an apartment that's close or condo building closer to KMS, they would sell their single family houses in Kent Mill and move there so that they would have single level living.
I might be able to help with that. Do you have an associate? Are you active in the association over there?
Yes.
If I could come to a meeting, and if you all wanted to talk about it, then if I could walk out of a meeting with something saying that the community would support doing this, I will go to the school system and ask them if there's not a use, can I get this property and use it for building housing? Because that's the kind of housing that, makes a lot of sense. You got an empty space. We could do, 3-story garden apartments, or you could do townhouses, you could do 2 over 1. Sometimes you can put a small 1-bedroom apartment on the bottom of a townhouse and have a 2-story townhouse above. There are a lot of creative things you can do that aren't large, that don't, but you could serve different income levels and different people's needs. So that's kind of exciting. I'm really glad you asked me if we could do that.
Well, definitely on the ground floor, I know that people would want multiple bedrooms, but one level without stairs. And without needing an elevator. But you also have my email because I emailed you. I met you at the Juneteenth big train game when we were next to my son. So if that helps, if that jogs your memory at all.
It jogs my memory.
Okay. I have lots of ideas, but that's probably like that's the one that I think has what people want the most in Kent Mill, even if they don't haven't thought through it as much yet, is that having an apartment building closer to Kent Mill Synagogue that is accessible for seniors and even younger people, because right now it's actually hard to grow that side of the neighborhood for younger people because they can't afford to move to that side of Kent Mill. Everything's on the University Boulevard side. That's more on the affordable side.
You want ownership or affordable rental?
I would assume my in-laws would probably prefer ownership, but I think that the neighborhood as a whole would prefer either. And if it was condo, they'd want the people to be able to rent it out if they choose to rent, just like in the towers.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yep. I'll come talk to you guys.
That would be fantastic. There's also 3 properties that are they're owned by a private owner, but they're undeveloped, adjacent to Kent Mill Synagogue that form an L shape.
How big?
I'm assuming it's about a little over an acre and a half or so, maybe even more, because there's also county space. I believe it's county space adjacent to it. It's the whole area from Kent Mill Road going along Gray's Lane to like Clintwood, where like the cut through is from Clintwood to Gray's Lane. And there's 3 like L-shaped property, 1 fronting Kent Mill Road, 2 fronting kind of like Clintwood-ish. And but it all connects onto the Gray's Lane side. And they're undeveloped. It's in the property tax records who owns it. But I don't know the owners myself. But it's empty. It's 3 empty lots. There's no buildings on them.
Okay. I'm interested.
And people would love for those to be developed into something that, like, even if that was like multi-family of some sort, townhouses or apartments. I think that there would be a lot of support for that in Kent Mill as well. There's just a lot less want for like anything else at the shopping center. It's more like want. They don't want another Warwick situation, which is a nightmare, and they don't maintain their building or their grounds.
Yep,
But we want more like another option.
I got it.
Okay,
Thank you.
any other questions? I want to just take a quick moment to acknowledge and thank Debbie Spielberg, who is also here tonight. I know many of you, including myself, have reached out to her repeatedly behind the scenes for help understanding something or to get some information or some advice. And so she's been great about doing that. I don't see her on camera, but thank you, Debbie. If you can get
I'm
us the
here.
Council of Governments documents, I will distribute
Yep.
them to the members.
I'm here, Cheryl.
Oh, hey,
And
Debbie. Thank you for all your help.
sure, happy to help.
Okay. And then if you could get me the Council of Governments documents, I'll distribute them. There seemed to be a lot of interest in that. And someone just texted me that John Holden has a very good question in the chat. John, can you just speak your question so I don't have to look for it?
Yes, thanks. Mark, could you please comment on the impacts on all of these upzoning plans from the federal workforce cuts? Given all of the current uncertainty, is now the time to be making the zoning changes in this ZTA 2502 and the UBC plan and the like?
Look, you raise a sad but important question. There is a very good possibility that people who lose federal jobs are not going to find other jobs here. I mean, just to be blunt, because, we've regionally, there's been an ongoing discussion about vacant jobs in the DC region, and people put that number as something like north of 100,000 jobs. But those jobs skew toward people with tech skills, and they're unfilled because we're lacking people with the skills needed to fill those jobs. Most federal workers, that's not the field they're in. They're administrators. They work in departments. They work on solving problems that involve mostly writing and reading. And so I don't anticipate that there are going to be good matches for a lot of the jobs that are vacant out there. The state is actually reducing the number of jobs they have. The county's vacancies, we finally got our vacancies down to under 100. So, we've taken applications from federal workers, but when those jobs are gone, we're out of jobs. And there is some opportunity in the school system, but it's also finite. They're very interested in hiring federal employees who might want to go into teaching and think they've got a gift in a particular area where they could contribute. And I have no doubt we could find some people who could do that. But again, that's going to be a finite number of teachers, numbered in, probably a couple of hundred, not in tens of thousands of people losing their jobs. So it's a long way of saying I expect that people are going to have to move. And I do think that when Trump gets finished with his truly ugly game, when, we're actually mass deporting people, because it's going to come here. I mean, I'd like to think it's not going to come here, but we're kind of ground zero. And I got one of those letters from him and the clown Stephen Miller about, all the different ways I will be arrested for harboring illegal immigrants in Montgomery County. So we are on their radar, unfortunately. And I expect, we will see things like you're seeing in other parts of the country at some point. That's going to empty out a whole lot of housing in the county. And the planning board is taking none of that into account. It's like everybody's got blindfolds on. They got their fingers in their ears and they're making sure they go la, 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 so they can make noise and make sure they don't hear anything. But the world is changing and the plans they're making don't fit the changing world. That's sad, but it's true.
Are there any other? Go ahead, Cheryl.
No, go ahead, Alan.
On Cheryl's behalf, I was asking if there's any more questions for the county executive. I don't see any, so I want to thank the county executive for joining us on our first July meeting. I also want to thank Debbie Spielberg for joining us, and we got a good crowd for the middle of the summer. So thank you very much. You all know what the assignment is. Please contact the county council. Please stay engaged. These issues will be with us for the foreseeable future. So thank you everybody for your questions, and we will post this video as soon as possible. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you all for, inviting me, and, always happy to work with you. And, we've won some battles before, so we can win another battle. It's not out of the question.
Thank you, everybody. We'll end this meeting now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.